Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Cade Bonsall. Once again, I'm joined by my friend Andrew Duvall, and today we are going to be discussing our predictions for the Batman Part 2. And we're going to be splitting this into two parts because we have a lot to talk about. So if you want to go check out the second part, feel free to go check it out on the channel. And yeah, let's get started. So, Andrew, the Batman, that was probably one of our favorite movies of 2022, right?
Definitely, I'd say it was probably my favorite of 2022. It's like that and Top Gun Maverick were basically kind of neck and neck.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Top Gun Maverick was great, and yeah, the Batman was definitely my favorite film of the year. And I got to tell you, I think it's definitely one of the best superhero films that we've had in quite a long time.
Yes, I don't know if I want to go this far, but is it the best we've had since? Well, honestly, really wasn't that long of a wait because No Way Home was what, end of 2021.
Yes, it was.
So that's like a 3 month gap. So actually, maybe it wasn't that terribly long of a wait.
Yeah, I will say though, it was pretty great. I did love the Batman. I think it's awesome. But yeah, the sequel, I am absolutely looking forward to the Batman Part 2. What about you?
Oh, I definitely am. Do they have a like rough time frame for release?
All I know is that it's supposed to be released in, I think right now it's going to be in October of 2025.
Okay, so we're still quite a ways away from it then.
Well, yeah, and I get it. They need their time to make it as good as possible, which I respect.
Yeah, let's hope there's not a pandemic in the middle of this one too.
Time will tell. But anyway, so we're going to talk about our predictions for the Batman Part 2. So, first off, right off the bat, let's talk about what we think the story is going to be. So, I got to tell you, one thing I hope will happen, and I think Matt Reeves has confirmed this already, is that Batman and Bruce Wayne will remain the focus of the story, like the first movie did.
And I believe that is absolutely the direction they should go. One thing I would like to see is more of an emphasis on Bruce Wayne because, as much as I love the Batman, I think they didn't do quite enough with him as Bruce. So I think they could expound on that definitely.
No, yeah, I get what you mean. And I think that that was kind of the whole point, the idea that Batman had consumed his life at that point, which made perfect sense for a Batman at the earlier stage of his career. And yeah, I would love to see, honestly, I feel like most of the Batman movies tend to focus a lot more on Bruce Wayne than Batman, if you know what I mean. And what I would like to see is a movie where it has the perfect balance of both Batman and Bruce Wayne, and you spend time with both personas really, and I'd like to see more of how he really struggles with balancing both personas because I think sometimes it never felt like a challenge for him all that much. It just seemed like he was able to do it flawlessly. And what I'd love to see in this movie is if he could like really show if it could show us the struggles of being Batman and Bruce Wayne. I think that could be a really good exploration for his character.
No, definitely.
And I also think that it would be cool to like force him out of the bat suit because one of the things about the Batman was when you saw him as Bruce Wayne, he just seemed so uncomfortable being around people as Bruce Wayne. Like being out of the suit was so like traumatizing for him. And I'd like to see that happen and show how that could help him figure out how to be Bruce Wayne more. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the method of getting him, like forcing him out of the suit, would be. Maybe it would be Alfred kind of giving him the idea that maybe you should make some appearances as your human face as opposed to your cowl.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also like to see Bruce learn a lot more about Wayne Enterprises because we didn't really see much of Wayne Enterprises in this movie. We saw it referenced a couple times, but I'd like to see Bruce get to know the business. I think that could be a really cool, you know, way to grow his persona as Bruce Wayne. And I'd love to see it happen at some point.
Yeah, because honestly, did we even seen Wayne Towers in the Batman? I don't think we did.
I don't think we did, no, but we heard it referenced a couple times, but never really explored too much. And yeah, that's something I do want to see in this one. One thing I also think should happen is so obviously in the first one we didn't really see the Playboy Bruce Wayne that we're used to, which I'm really glad about because I don't think that persona would have really worked in the first movie with what was going on. Do you agree?
No, I think it would have been a bit too of a stark contrast with the tone of the rest of the movie because it's a very dark, very bleak movie for a good chunk of it.
Yes, it is. And I'm glad that we didn't see that Bruce Wayne, but I think this movie could be a great opportunity to introduce the Bruce Wayne that we're used to. And what I mean is, I don't think we should just immediately see him with that persona at the beginning of the movie. I think it'd be a lot more fun to develop the persona rather than immediately figure it out. Like see him figure out what he needs to do to put on a performance in the public.
Yeah, maybe something akin to he starts going out with one woman and then he purposely creates a scandal by, being seen with another. Something that kind of plants the seed for the more Playboy-esque aspects of Bruce Wayne that you can just, I think it would be too stark of a contrast to go from complete recluse who's very clearly dealing with some social anxiety or problems to ultra rich, flamboyant, Playboy character.
Absolutely. And I also think that aside from his Playboy side, I like to see his side in philanthropy because one of the things that that was brought up in the first one is how he doesn't really use much of his money to help the city, and which makes sense because all he could care about was being Batman at that point. And this could be a great opportunity to grow that as well, because I would like to see him instead of just immediately deciding, okay, well, you know what? Yeah, I should use my money to help the city. I'll just make all these investments into places. I'd like to see him really find something that he cares about, um, donating to aside from just immediately doing that. And I think that could be a really great way to grow his character. What do you think?
Yeah, because again, that would be kind of building on another aspect without just flipping a switch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not entirely sure what kind of causes what he would follow up on. Maybe something akin to tying into the what was the name of the fund from the first movie that everybody?
The renewal.
Yes, maybe something like Bruce learns about, or he claims he learned about all these, corruption in the renewal fund that his father started, and he's now taking the initiative to try and fix it, to actually make it what it was supposed to be used for.
Yeah, that could be a really cool exploration, and I hope they do something like that. But yeah, that's one thing I'm looking forward to. But aside from that, aside from what his growth will be, in terms of what the overall story would be for the film, I got to tell you, I really hope, as much as I loved the fact that the Batman was a detective story and we finally got to see that side of Batman, I don't know if the next movie should be a full-on detective story.
Yeah, I feel where you're coming from because I feel like if they did just another straight up detective story, it would feel maybe a bit repetitive.
Yes, I think it could get repetitive. I mean, you can keep the detective elements without making it a full-on detective story. He can still be a detective.
Oh no, I mean it's kind of hard to do a Batman movie without having some aspect of the detective piece, but maybe don't have it be just a straight up crime noir like the first movie.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and that's where we come into what Matt Reeves has already said about the film. So he just has described the movie as being an epic crime saga. And I think that this sounds really, really cool and interesting. I do think that if this is the case, it could be a crime war type film, if it's sticking within that route of being a sort of grounded crime epic like he describes it. And I think it could take inspiration from films like, because you know how this movie took a lot of inspiration from movies like Seven and Chinatown. I think movies that this could take inspiration from could be like The Godfather or maybe even The Departed or something.
I could definitely see more of the Departed, not so much with the Godfather, just because the Godfather is much more. There's much more of the family aspect, the family turmoil aspect,
Right.
which I don't really think they could do in the way they presented this Batman in world. But something like The Departed, where you've got different crime families, he's rising to power and fighting with each other, and people stabbing each other in the back, very cloak and dagger stuff. That I think could work very well.
Yeah, I think that that could be a great film to take inspiration from. You know what else? In terms of the comics, so the first movie took a lot of inspiration from comics like The Long Halloween and Batman Year One and Batman Earth One. One comic storyline that I think this movie could take great inspiration from would be No Man's Land.
And can you elaborate on that? Because admittedly, I'm not super familiar with this arc.
So basically, with No Man's Land, Gotham was hit by, I think it was, if I remember right, it was an earthquake that basically left it, like a lot of people considered it to be no longer part of the United States, and a lot of the citizens evacuated and it was just overrun by this crime and violence and this war between various criminals and their gangs, and it was all about Batman and the police trying to rise up and take back their city. I think No Man's Land was partly adapted in the Dark Knight Rises as a storyline, which I think you can kind of see how. So, but I think it could be a good storyline to sort of revisit and explore in a different way with this movie.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. And I mean, they if that is the way they want to go, they definitely set that up at the end of the first one. Obviously it wasn't an earthquake; it was a big flood. But the way Penguin is staring out the window, looking like assessing the kingdom that is soon to be his.
Right.
I definitely see where you're coming from. I definitely feel like that's a solid bet where they're going forward with this.
Absolutely. And next thing I wanted to talk about is so we have no idea who the villain of this movie is going to be, or the villains at least, and we'll get into that later. But one thing I do want to see is whoever the villain is for this movie, he or she, I would like to see the villain challenge Batman in a way that the Riddler did not in the first movie.
Yes, because Riddler's thing was very intellectual,
Right.
trying to outsmart Batman, which admittedly he kind of did in a way, considering the fact Batman didn't realize the bomb plot until he had gone to see Riddler himself.
Right.
But then he did when he went back to Riddler's apartment. Then he figured it out, and then he wasn't able to stop the bombs, but Riddler didn't get what he wanted in the end. Like his followers didn't commit the major act of terrorism that they were planning.
Right.
So something different from that. So would you see Batman being challenged physically or perhaps psychologically? Because there are certain villains that fit into both of those, and a couple of them we have seen before. Like for example, physically, I mean, the first one that comes to mind obviously is Bane, but we've seen Bane twice to very different degrees.
Yep. I think Bane could be interesting, but I don't know if they'll use him. I think they have other ideas of what to do. But physically and psychologically challenging him, I think we could see. I honestly think Hush would be a great choice, and we'll get into him later. I think that Hugo Strange would be a perfect villain for that, which again, we'll talk about that later. But yeah, whoever the villain is of this movie, I just want them to challenge Batman different than how Riddler did, because I think that's one way that could make the movie feel different from the first one.
Yeah, and again, there's quite a few that would fit for the psychological aspect. Like you mentioned Hugo Strange, you mentioned Hush. I think Hush just fits into this world too well to not be used. But I'm not sure if he would be the one for this movie. I mean, psychological, obviously Scarecrow comes to mind, but we've seen a very good Scarecrow, so maybe not him. As for one that I would quite like to see, and I know we've discussed this before off screen, was Mad Hatter.
Yes, absolutely. And I actually do know something about him, which we'll get into in a little bit. Yeah, I think he could work very well in this universe. But aside from that, aside from who the villain will be, one thing that I really hope happens is I hope in this movie Jim Gordon is promoted to commissioner.
Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty safe bet considering the fact, one of the major one of the major plot points was realizing that, all of the superiors in the police force were basically corrupt and are on Carmine Falcone's payroll, and either A, were exposed or B, ended up dead.
Right.
So, Commissioner Gordon, so Gordon being shown as, the last good cop in the city, it only makes sense that he would be promoted after this, major house cleaning.
I agree. And another thing I do hope happens in terms of the story, and this is actually something I've been wanting to ask you about for a while because I think it's something that a lot of fans have been debating over the past year. So, do you think that this franchise should remain the grounded and realistic version that it is? Or do you think the sequels should embrace the more supernatural and fantastical elements of Gotham that we see in the comics?
That is a very good question because I think one of the reasons I liked the Batman so much was because of how grounded it was and how not terribly off the wall it was. That's why I loved Batman Begins and The Dark Knight so much. Not so much The Dark Knight Rises, but that's a story for another time. Is because they did feel very grounded. Yes, you had super villains in it, like Scarecrow, Ra's al Ghul, Joker, etc. But everybody felt like they could actually be real villains, if that makes any sense. Like nobody felt terribly off the wall, insane. Like where did this person couldn't exist in the real world? But a unhinged anarchist is something we are frankly way too common in seeing in today's world. A corrupt doctor, also something we've seen way too much of in this world. I mean, yeah, we don't see a lot of incredibly gifted immortal martial artists, but they didn't really go into that aspect of the Ra's al Ghul characters.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I do think that maybe if they do end up stepping into the supernatural or fantastical side of Gotham, I think that could happen in the future, but I'm not sure if the second movie is the right time to do it at.
Yeah, if I was the one making this movie, what I would do is I would choose a character who has some kind of like has a supernatural connection, but maybe do it in a way that plays down that. A good example, if we're going back to the Mad Hatter idea, would be the way they presented Mad Hatter in Batman Arkham City, the video game.
Yes.
Where yes, he's got this supernatural element, but they give him a more grounded reason for it. It's the mind control, it's the drugging.
Yeah, I think that that could be an awesome thing to explore, and we'll see what happens. Again, I think it might be just a little too early to explore any of those elements, but we'll see. They could surprise us for all we know. But in terms of who, like, what new characters they could explore or bring into the fold, here's who I think would be like. This is a list of people who I think would be great for the sequel or sequels if we see them along the line. So, first off, who do I want to see in the next movie? I would love to see Harvey Dent.
Now, would you want him to be a major character, or would you maybe want him to be kind of a introduced in passing, like, oh, we got a new Gotham district attorney. Oh, what was his name? Dirk? No, no, Dent. That's the guy.
Yeah, yeah, I get what you mean, and I think that that would be awesome. Yeah, I think he should be more introduced in this movie. I don't think he should have just 1 or 2 scenes. I think he could be more like a supporting character, and we could see just like we could start to meet him and start to learn about him more. And I think if we do get a third movie, hopefully, I think we will, that's where he could be more of a major player. And at some point, that could be a good place to finally see him get scarred like he's supposed to be. Because again, I think this could be a great beginning for the evolution of Two-Face rather than just having his whole arc play out through one movie. Because as great as The Dark Knight is, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I think that it'd be nice not to redo Two-Face's arc exactly the same as that and flesh it out a little bit more over this franchise.
Yeah. Plus, because if they did that, this would literally just be a long Halloween adaptation.
Yes, it
Because
probably
we've
would.
had mysterious serial killer taking on the mob and the corrupt police, and now we would have had the Two Face arc. This would literally just be the long Halloween.
Yeah, it probably would. And you know what else? Just like in The Dark Knight and in The Long Halloween, I think, well, mainly just The Dark Knight, I think Harvey could actually be a great new ally for both Batman and Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, because especially if he's only being introduced to some degree, I feel like him being the ally would be a good fit.
Yeah, I totally agree. But next on the list, who else do I want to see? I would love to see Harvey Bullock actually. I think that could be a great addition to this franchise because I think after this movie, I think a lot of GCPD officers are going to start trusting Batman a lot more. And I think Harvey Bullock could be like a great character to have as one of the few members of GCPD who still kind of distrusts Batman, but could also serve as like a reluctant ally for him.
Yeah, that I don't know how big of a role he would play, but I think that would be an interesting dynamic to add. Somebody who yeah, I still don't necessarily agree with your methods. I don't entirely trust you, but I feel like you're doing the right thing.
That's one of the things I love about their relationship, Batman and Bullock's relationship, and it's one of the things I enjoy so much about it.
Yeah, it would add some shades of gray to the black and white world that is Batman.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you have either those who wish to fight evil or you have the evil.
Yes.
So somebody who actually does blur those lines a little bit, I think, would be a nice dynamic to include. Plus, I mean, old grizzled old cop who doesn't entirely, agree with the vigilante, but thinks he's doing the right thing. That just seems like it would fit into a crime noir world perfectly. So
Yeah, I agree. Another character I think could be interesting to see in this movie, maybe not have a huge role, but just to visit. What about Barbara Gordon? Because I think that that could add, introducing her could add a little bit more to Jim's character and kind of explore his life outside of GCPD.
that would be interesting. I don't know. Again, I don't know how big of a role she would play. And how would you introduce her? Because I'm thinking like, oh, Jim goes home from work one day, picks up his daughter. It's like, oh, how was work today, sweetie? It's like, oh, I'm good. Yeah, that kind of interaction. But is that what you were thinking, or
I'm kind of not totally decided on that yet. I just think that introducing her could add more to his character, and I think it could it could remind people like what the heroes are fighting for type of situations. I think it could be something really nice to see. And I think it'd be cool if we saw Batman meet Barbara and show how much of a fan she is of his. And I think that could be one of the things that keep continues to inspire Batman to keep doing what he does. Yeah, I think Barbara could be a great addition. I mean, I'm not saying that this should definitely lead to her becoming Batgirl at some point. I honestly think if anything, I think Oracle would fit better in this universe than the Batgirl.
yeah? But there would be quite a big hole to fill in there.
Yes, there would, but you know what? Time will tell. We'll see what happens. She might not even appear at all. Another character that I would love to see is Lucius Fox.
Yeah, I feel like Harvey Dent, that one feels like, or the idea of Jim Gordon becoming commissioner. I feel like that one's kind of inevitable to happen because he is, and for a very long time has been part of Batman's, trusted inner circle. It's been, Alfred, it's been Gordon, it's been Lucius Fox, and then later on, obviously Robin and Batgirl and that circle. But I don't think we're getting Batgirl, and I would put my house on the line and say we're not getting Robin.
We'll see. But yeah, if Bruce does end up exploring more of Wayne Enterprises in this movie, I just think this could be a great opportunity to introduce Lucius Fox into this franchise. Again, I don't know how big a role he would play, but I think that just having him, he'd be such a great member of this new franchise, and I'd love to see a new version of him. Because as much as I loved Morgan Freeman's performance as Lucius Fox, I still would like to see what a Lucius Fox in this film could be like.
Indeed, yeah, and like I was saying, I feel like this one is kind of inevitable, especially if they do want to explore the Wayne Tech aspect of Bruce Wayne's life.
Yes, absolutely.
Like I know we're not really given rankings on how likely these characters are to appear, but if we were, I would say Lucius Fox is an easy 8 or 9 out of 10. Like I feel like it's inevitable.
It is probably inevitable. Another character that I'd actually really like to see, just because she hasn't really been on the big screen in a long time, I'd actually like to see Vicky Vale. And here's one of the reasons why I'd kind of like to see her. So, in terms of what the story could be, I think Vicky could serve as, and we've talked about this before, I think she could be, a press member who's trying to figure out, why is Bruce Wayne suddenly no longer reclusive anymore? Why is he now trying to help the city after spending so many years away from it or just hiding from it and whatnot? And I think doing this could make Bruce more aware of why it's important to put on a performance in the public and try to keep up with everything. And I also think that if having her maybe not, I guess she could be a love interest in this film if she's introduced, because I do know that they might be bringing back Catwoman. And this is another subject we've discussed before. I think that giving him more than one love interest in one film, and that has been done in, I think, The Dark Knight Rises was the only one to do that. We had, spoilers, we had Catwoman and Talia in that film. In this film, I think giving him multiple love interests could be a great way for him to realize like how to build his playboy persona, if you know what I mean. But we'll see what happens. What do you think? Would you like to see Vicky Vale?
I mean, I think that would be a nice touch, and I feel like kind of tying into the idea I had earlier, where it's like Bruce Wayne starts a relationship with one woman, then he's caught with another. Where I think maybe have him start a relationship with somebody else, and then get caught with Vicky. I think like, oh, is this actually an affair, or is she trying to get close to him? Is she trying to get close to her? Like, I feel
Yeah,
like
I get it.
in that story you could definitely tell, and I think again that would definitely help him develop his more public persona.
Yes. Lastly, one character that I would actually really like to see is Leslie Tompkins.
Now, please remind me, who is Leslie Tompkins?
So basically, she was a doctor who worked with Thomas Wayne when he was much younger, before he had died. And after the death of his parents, she became sort of a mother figure to Bruce, while Alfred was more like the father figure side. And I think that Leslie could be a great addition because she could serve as, I think a lot of times, especially in the animated series, she was sort of like the nurse who would patch Bruce up, if Alfred wasn't around to help him. And I think that having Leslie in this film could be a great way to explore, like, to learn more about Bruce's father and what he did, because we did learn quite a bit about Bruce's father in this movie and what he was involved with. But I think this could be a great way with Leslie. We could learn more about, like, about another side of Thomas that we hadn't heard about in the first movie.
Yeah, maybe the more altruistic side of Thomas Wayne.
Yes, I agree. But yeah, I think she'd be a great addition.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting one to add. I don't know how big of a role she would play, but I think that would be an interesting dynamic to add.
For sure.
I don't know if they'd be able to add all of these characters because that would be adding a lot
Oh yeah, no,
for one movie.
I'm not saying all these I'm hoping all these characters are included. I just think, having some of them in it would be great. They could appear in the future aside from the Batman Part 2, but we'll see. All right, guys, I think that's going to be the end of this part. If you guys want to go check out the next part on the channel, feel free. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you there.